Shabbat Shalom. Thank you for making this time to have our Shabbat circle together and our Rosh Chodesh. When a little item catches my attention and pulls up a chair and sits down in my heart, I always take that as a good sign. And yesterday, I saw a little news piece in such a world of heart-wrenching news that just made me smile a little bit. There is a new television show coming, so much from which to choose. I don't know that I'll have a chance to see it, but it sounds delightful, and I hope it will be. It's called The Mountains, and it will be a show that highlights in scripted form the joyful, nostalgic getaways that characterized the Borscht Belt of a bygone era, focusing especially on how crucial and beloved those Catskill resorts were to Jewish families in the early and mid part of the 20th century. I don't know when The Mountains will debut, but one of the product placements associated with this new show will be called Grossinger's Rye Cracker Boards, the Catskills Best. Grossinger's, along with Kutcher's and the Concord and many, many other resorts, were the summer setting for so many Jewish families, escaping the heat and the humidity of the city and embracing the good life that mid-century America had to offer. The packaging for Grossinger's Rye Cracker Boards shows two bathing suit clad ladies with hats and a beach ball walking slightly suggestively around a swimming pool with a beautiful hotel building in the back, and in the corner what look very much to me like 3 matzah crackers. These rye crackers will be based on Jenny Grossinger's beloved rye bread recipe. Grossinger's, I will say now with full disclosure, was a beloved part of my father's young adulthood. As so many young and medium-aged people did in that era, they went to Grossinger's to find friends, in many cases to find the loves of their lives. So many lifelong love stories began at the Catskill resorts, to laugh, to eat, to sunbathe, and to dance. For those of you who remember the movie Dirty Dancing, very much based on the Catskill resorts, they made very few overt, if almost no overt references to Judaism in Dirty Dancing, but the dancing was an integral part of the courtship rituals of that era. So for all of those who went up there to do the samba and the rumba, this was absolutely part of the culture. And of course, the area became known as the Borscht Belt, among other names, because of the centrality of many, many Eastern European foods that were on the extraordinary banquet of delicacies and home-cooked foods that Jenny Grossinger and the other mavens and machers of that era put on the table for their guests to enjoy. My dad would always speak of his marvelous memories of Grossinger's. And what's particularly precious and why I really smiled about this little story and the matzah-looking rye cracker breads that may be available coming to an Andronico's near you, perhaps soon, is that it wasn't just a setting of my family's past, but we were very fortunate to go to Grossinger's several times in our own childhood. It was the site of some very sweet memories. We went with family, elderly family. We could eat and drink to our heart's content. These were kosher resorts. So for so many people, it was such a luxury to just be able to eat everything that was available. They had marvelous Passover feasts. People would go for the entire week of Passover and just relax and be away from the city. So I have my own memories of Grossinger's, and it was such a pleasure long before I went to Jewish summer camp to just be in a place where it was also good and joyous and marvelous to be Jewish. I was too young to know how precious it was to be in a safe place for my Judaism, but the older I get, the more I relish those places where we can be fully Jewish, not have to explain ourselves, not have to answer for ourselves, not have to look over our shoulders or be too attuned to what people might be saying. And that's, of course, why these resorts were so important and not just a sweet dose of nostalgia. These resorts, friends, were created at a time when Jews largely were not welcome at mainstream hotels and resorts. So many of the getaways in upstate New York and in all of the surrounding areas, far, far too many, had signs in their lobbies that said, "No Hebrews allowed." Some even proudly had signs that said things on the order of, "No Hebrews or consumptives allowed." And so the Jews did what we as a people have always done. We made our own. The earliest bungalow resorts were set up by Jewish farmers for people to escape the city and to have a little what was called a kuchelein. You'd cook for yourself in little kitchenette bungalows where very often as the decades went on, women who didn't work at the time would come for the entire summer with their children who could play freely and breathe some fresh air. And the husbands would come up on the weekend. I wouldn't be surprised if some of our extended circle had memories of just such an arrangement. We made our own. We made oases for ourselves, and there we could celebrate being Jewish and being accepted. When my family went to Grossinger's, and we have Jenny Grossinger's cookbook still on the shelf, when we went there, for me and my brother in the 70s and very early 80s, we didn't realize that that was the last gasp of those hotels. I didn't realize until yesterday, actually, that Grossinger's closed in 1986. I didn't realize it was that long ago. And a few resorts held on for as long as they could, really into the 90s, and then they closed their doors. Maybe not forever. There are some signs of rebirth in that area. It should be. We had some marvelous memories there. Among them, Lou Goldstein, who delighted everybody by playing the most wonderful, wry, and surprising game of Simon Says you could ever have imagined in your life. He would catch people utterly unawares. He had a fast repartee with the older and younger folk, and my dad copied that wonderful style and brought that Simon Says from Grossinger's to so many of our birthday parties growing up, catching our friends off guard and delighting them to no end. They'd ask every year, "Is your dad going to do Simon Says?" They had no idea my dad had learned that technique at Grossinger's. Speaking of dancing, we laughed and laughed and laughed with my darling mom, who took a marvelous class in the hustle dance, which was all the craze in 1976 and 79. My darling mom showed us what she had learned at her hustle class and allowed us to just have a wonderful laugh. These are places of wonderful memory. And I'm hoping so much that this new TV show called The Mountains and the product placement of Jenny Grossinger's rye crackers will honor that time properly. Ironically, they attribute the demise of the Catskill resorts to a number of things. One, to the advent of air conditioning in the city. So not as many people fled for upstate to the resorts. Also to the fact that cheap air travel became quite the thing in the second half of the 20th century, and Jewish people who thankfully have flourished in this country were able to travel to far-off destinations, the likes of which their parents and grandparents could not have dreamed of. Another reason that the resorts declined was because women were working and going for entire summers to the bungalow colonies to have the husbands just come up on weekends was a way of the past. And another reason was that Jews were allowed to go to pretty much anywhere they wanted. The no Hebrews and consumptive signs came down, and Jews have been accepted in this country in ways, again, that so many previous generations could never have imagined. Every day, it seems, we're hearing about places and spheres and organizations and societies where Jewish people have flourished and devoted so much time, energy, money, care in this country, where it seems like one by one, we are no longer welcome. That's devastating. So when I read about this history, it struck me deeper than just TV shows and products. This was a remnant of a time when we were not allowed, when we were not wanted or welcome. But we fended for ourselves and made something special. And if once again we find ourselves not welcome in far too many places, it won't be the first time. And my prayer is that regardless of what happens, there will be still so many places where Jews are welcomed and celebrated, and that if need be, we will continue to make our own safe and welcoming spaces for one another, where we can truly be our full Jewish selves. If it takes rebuilding the Catskill resorts, I pray we'll have a chance to do so. Friends, let us offer a prayer together that the doors of this country and our world will continue to remain open to Jews and to people who embrace our way of life. Let us celebrate those who were innovative enough to make safe spaces when we needed them. And as our ancestors in the book of Numbers knew, sometimes we stand on the shores at the threshold of an uncertain future. But the key is, as they did, to keep going forward together. Shabbat Shalom and Chodesh Tov. May we meet always in safe spaces for joyous times.